What's up, nerds? Welcome back to Lore of the Worlds. Today, we're going to be doing pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. We're going to be looking at every single unanswered question in excruciating detail. We're going to be analyzing every loose plot thread in the Eragon Universe. As a quick warning, I would encourage everyone that's watching this video to be caught up. That includes books 1 through 4, as well as the Fork, the Witch in the Worm. There's definitely going to be spoilers all around in here. If you'd like to examine my spoiler policy, I have a whole video explaining that in excruciating and fun detail as well. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at Okay, plot threads. He did it! Eragon finally did it. Galbatorix is dead and everyone can finally live in peace, happily, ever after. This was a fun video. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you folks for tuning in today. It's been a ton of fun. No. I was joking. Get those credits out of here. If you know anything about historical empires, you are probably well aware of what happens when a power vacuum is created, right? Which is exactly what I believe Mr. Palini will be exploring at some point in the Eragon Universe with Galbatorix's old Broadring Empire. So yeah, the Empire was a very big place, right? There's hints in the original series that even he had trouble keeping it together. And I could very much see civil war breaking out among the various factions of this old empire, especially if Orin is still salty that he wasn't handed the role of king after Galbatorix's defeat. Cities and provinces trying to split off and create their own kingdoms or duchies does seem to be likely, and there's, the constant question of whether or not it's even worth it to keep the old empire intact after everything that's happened. So we also have potentially Urgals, dwarves, and elves migrating into the cities of the old empire, creating an even less stable situation out of the whole mess. The new king, or in this case, queen, has quite a bit of politicking ahead of her if she wants to keep the empire together and reforge it into something new. Something where the citizens actually, want to be under the dominion of the empire. So don't worry, we'll be exploring Naswada's character in detail a little bit later on in the video. But for now, let's go ahead and turn our attention to the north, where trouble seems to be just over the horizon. As we learn a bit about in the Fork, the Witch, and the Worm, Murtagh has been up to some super interesting business up in the north, right? He's going ahead and hunting down some sort of witch, and his current line of investigation is implied to be of the utmost importance. The witch in question, Bakel, as she's apparently named, is doing some very interesting stuff with wordless magic, which has been specified many times throughout the series to be incredibly dangerous. So whether this is simply an investigative mission to find out more about her plans and ambitions, or it's something far more dangerous, is left completely on the table, which is unfortunately exactly where we're also going to have to leave it as well until the next book in the series, named Murtagh, hits shelves in the fall of 2023. For the record, I can't flip and wait. Down to the southeast of Allegasia proper, underneath the lone mountain of Arngor, we find the namesake of this series. Eragon's been very busy trying to re-establish the Riders, protect the Eldunari, and bring about a sort of unification. If you recall, the dwarves and Urgals were added to the pact with dragons, humans, and elves, and are now able to become Riders. I believe we'll be seeing quite a bit about this as the series progresses. There is quite a lot to explore here, and conflicts are naturally going to arise from adding 2 whole new races to the Dragon Rider Pact. Though peace is the main goal of the Riders, there are bound to be intense interpersonal conflicts and fantasy race-related divisions popping up, all of which could potentially be exacerbated by politics happening within the old empire and far beyond. There's like a million stories to be told here, and 2 million questions to answer, but I'm most curious about the biggest question Eragon still has yet to even begin answering, and that's, what is the purpose of the Riders after all's said and done? Like, is it to keep peace? If so, they historically haven't done a very good job of that. Is it to rule? I don't think that's what Eragon wants the riders to be. I mean, he explicitly turned down the role of king when it was explicitly offered to him. Do the riders exist to instill a sense of unity between the diverse races? If so, they have done a better job of that, but it all ultimately broke apart in a few very short years. You'll recall that the elves and the humans had almost zero contact with each other for about, 100 years, save for members of the Varden. Or is the Dragon Rider's ultimate purpose, and this is only a theory at this point, to protect from outside threats? That's my favorite theory that I've seen floating around on various subreddits, things like that, and I'd love to explore that possibility sometime very soon. Unfortunately for now, we're going to have to direct our questions inward, specifically in Allegasia, and more specifically into Duweldenvarden, because that, my friends, is where the Manoa tree rests. During the course of Brisingr, Eragon needed a sword. Specifically, if you'll recall, he needed a sword made from a specific material named Brightsteel. And he got that material from under the Manoa tree, but at a cost. Well, what cost? It's a fantastic question. I'm just going to go ahead and read you the passage in question for context, and then we'll talk about what it all means.
The canopy of the Manoa tree grew still, and for several minutes all was quiet in the clearing. Then the ground began to shake, and the roots in front of Eragon began to twist and grind, shedding flakes of bark as they pulled aside to reveal a bare patch of dirt, out of which emerged what appeared to be a lump of corroded iron roughly 2 feet long and 1.5 feet wide. As the ore came to rest on the surface of the rich black soil, Eragon felt a slight twinge in his lower belly. He winced and rubbed at the spot, but the momentary flare of discomfort had already vanished. Then the root around his ankle loosened and retreated into the ground, as did those that had been holding Saphira in place. "Here is your metal," whispered the Manoa tree. "Take it and go."
So, what the hell was that about? Yeah, there's several theories floating around out there, but none of them have quite satisfied me personally. And I think the answer is going to be somewhat more arcane than we may realize, and will rely on information that we don't necessarily have quite yet. This is definitely a plot point to keep an eye on. It's going to be explored somewhere down the line, I'm sure of it. In addition to the plot elements with loose ends, there are also several characters whose stories are nowhere near finished. And by that I mean pretty much everyone that's not already dead must have a part to play in the future. So let's go ahead and examine some of those characters. We'll look at where they are currently, and we'll try to guess at what the future has in store for them. First off, there's everyone's favorite dragon rider, Arya. In addition to becoming the third known dragon rider in existence at the end of the inheritance cycle, she inherited the elven crown from her mother, Islandi, who died in the assault on Urubayan. Arya elected not to join Eragon on his journey to find a new home for the riders, instead leading her people from her seat in Elismira, the elven capital. So if I had to guess, I'd say that her story going forward will probably revolve around her split responsibilities between being the leader of her people, training as a dragon rider, and helping to actually rebuild the riders themselves. She's got a lot on her plate, and her story is going to be fascinating to follow going forward. Next up, we have another leader with quite a lot on her plate, and that is, of course, going to be Nasuada. As discussed earlier, Nasuada finds herself as the ruler of the remains of the Brodring Empire at the end of Inheritance, which could go any number of ways, honestly. If I had to guess, I'd say that most of her story going forward, at least in the background of the next book or two, is going to be about her consolidation of power and trying to hold together an empire that's, trying to rip itself apart for any number of the aforementioned reasons. And she's gonna need to build up her politicking skills to stay on top. As any great conqueror realizes eventually, gaining power and keeping a hold of power are two very, very different skill sets. Now, Nasuada seems like a natural diplomat, but it remains to be seen how her natural talents are going to pay off now that she has won the crown. And Serta's ruler, known colloquially as Orin the Butthole, was not too stoked to see her gain power. I could very well see him starting to fund rebellions and encourage independence along the border cities. For now, let's leave Nasuada behind and move a bit southeast to check in on our old pal Auric. Much like the two rulers previously mentioned, he too found himself in a position of immense power at the end of the war against Galbatorix. So, Auric is currently the king of the Dwarven race, ruling from his seat under the mountain in Farthendur. He's got his own problems to deal with, mostly having to do with the expulsion of that one tribe after the attempted assassination of Eragon. It's that tribe, for those that are wondering. Camera Kyle forgot to look this up before he shot, so now editor Kyle has to deal with it. Sorry, editor Kyle. Sorry, editor Kyle. Asshole. So who knows what the hell sort of trouble they're going to cause, or how the other dwarven tribes are going to react to all this trouble. The balance between the tribes seems to be a pretty precarious one, and it's going to have to be handled with a deft touch going forward. Like a dwarven craftsman shaping his gems, Auric will have to handle his charge with great care and attention to detail. That last sentence may have been overly poetic, but that's okay because I think our next character would be able to appreciate it. That character is, of course, Angela, and who the hell knows what she's up to, right? She's been floating around the series from the very beginning, but her origins, ambitions, and plans are nebulous at best. She's one gigantic question mark, and what she's up to deserves its very own video, and honestly is probably coming pretty soon. For now, all we know is that she's tasked herself with taking care of and raising our next character, Elva. Elva is by far the most interesting character to me going forward. Where Angela is a big question mark, Elva is a total wild card. She was forced to grow up incredibly quickly and feel enormous amounts of pain from everyone around her at a very young age, and was taken advantage of at every opportunity. And yes, regardless of their motivations, the Varden, and specifically Nasuada, were absolutely taking advantage of Elva's abilities, and by extension, making her curse all the more unbearable. I am very excited to see who she grows into when she gets a few more years under her belt, especially under Angela's tutelage, right? Either way, her story is nowhere near resolved, and I believe she has a massive role to play in the future of Alagasia, but until then, let's put her out of our minds and check in on our resident hammer wielder. Hammer wielder. Our resident hammer wielder. Roran is in a super interesting position right now. He's planning on refounding Palancar Valley. He has the utmost loyalty of every single person that follows him, and I mean, he saved an entire village from the Razak, led them all the way across the Empire, fought a war with them, and then came back. Of course he has their utmost loyalty. He absolutely has a major role to play in the future of Alagasia, and I would wager that he probably poses the largest threat to Nasuada's stability. Keep in mind, like, almost all the soldiers fighting for the Varden have either heard rumors of his feats or have seen them firsthand directly. He's a near mythological figure at this point, and woe is the king that chooses to piss him off. Speaking of people you shouldn't piss off, let's check in on Roran's cousin, Murtagh. Okay, I guess half cousin, technically. Either way, Murtagh and his Dragon Thorn are in quite a unique position as well. Having lived as an unwilling servant of Galbatorix for most of his life, Murtagh has quite a bit of atoning to do. It's gotta be a hard thing to live with the things that he's had to do, whether he had a say in them or not. I think he's the type of character that will absolutely find a way to blame himself regardless, and while I do feel bad for him, it's gonna lead to some really interesting character development going forward. Watching his bond deepen with Thorn, now that they are both free of Galbatorix's grip, is going to be interesting, if painful. But I think they will come out of it having learned quite a bit about who they are, and especially who they want to be for the future. In the meantime, they're the dark, brooding Dragon Rider pair that plays by their own rules. Side note, I really hope that at some point we get like a sort of buddy cop storyline between Eragon and Murtagh as they go on adventures and learn to be friends again. That would be so much fun. But remember, we're not going to have to wait too long for an update to Murtagh's character. In the meantime, let's go ahead and talk about our final character today, Ed Spielers. Ed Spielers is most well known for a movie he did a while ago with John Malkovich and Jeremy Irons, but recently has been getting some pretty engaging work on shows such as Downton Abbey, You, and Picard. Oh. Whoops. Got my notes confused there. Ed Spielers is the actor known for playing Eragon. Let's talk about Eragon the character instead. Eragon currently wields what amounts to the largest chunk of power and influence in all of Algasia, but he's decided to drop out of politics entirely for the time being as he reestablishes the Riders. So for now, I'm convinced that he'll be busy training the next generation of Riders, but the question from earlier still remains. Like, what are the Riders now, and what are they for? He and Saphira are probably going to be wrestling with those two questions for the rest of their lives, and it's going to be fascinating seeing what solutions they come up to deal with the issues in front of them, all while planning for the future, facing threats, and probably getting dragged back into politics somewhere along the way. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that Eragon's story is far from done. We'll take a closer look at where Eragon's headed very soon. But for now, we have a bit of treasure hunting to attend to. Throughout the war with Galbatorix, there were quite a few artifacts that have gone missing. I think that some of them are simply gone from the stories forever, but I would wager that a fair few of them have yet to be discovered again and used for either good or evil. First, and my personal favorite, is the Belt of Beloth the Wise. It's the belt of gems given to Eragon by Oramis and went missing after the Battle of Drosleona. It is noted that Eragon tried specifically to find it, but was unable to using conventional methods. Something about the phrasing used by Paolini when he talks about the belt going missing is kind of fishy to me, and I would wager that this is going to come back at some point in the future. It's played too big of a role up to this point to be sort of hand-waved away like that. So, keep an eye out for it. I do think we'll be seeing it eventually. Another important Rider artifact that's gone missing is Oramis's gold sword, Nagling. Lost after the battle between Murtagh and Oramis in the skies above Gilead, the sword held a great deal of importance to Oramis and Glader and was seemingly never mentioned in the books ever again. There's not really like a whole lot of places it could have gone, so I see three different scenarios. First, it could have fallen and just not been found, right? Maybe there were wards around it preventing scrying, something like that, who knows. Second, maybe Murtagh and Thorn could have recovered it and given it to Galbatorix, whereupon it could have been placed in his Vault of Fallen Rider swords. Finally, I could see it having been recovered by the elves after the Battle of Gilead and taken to their safe custody. I think we will be seeing it again in some capacity soon, but who knows how we're gonna get there. Speaking of weapons, let's talk about the Dothdair. So these were legendary dragon-killing weapons from the ancient Elf and Dragon War, and were incredibly effective in the job of taking down dragons. So all 12 were believed to have been lost following the Dragon-Elf War, at least until we see one turn up during Inheritance and very nearly murder Saphira. Saphira was fine, but Galbatorix's dragon Shuriken was not so very lucky. He got stabbed clean through the head by way of his eye, which is like super metal. But also, it does seem to have gone missing after the events of Inheritance. I think this is the artifact on the list that's like most likely to have been destroyed by Galbatorix's literal explosion, and to be honest, I don't think it's going to turn up again. However, the material that makes up the Dothdair is mysterious and never really explained, so maybe we see its unique properties replicated somewhere down the line. On the other hand, we would be incredibly lucky to never see the next artifact ever again, and that would be, of course, the Razak eggs. There's definitely a few that Galbatorix squirreled away somewhere, but where and under what sort of protection remains to be seen. I think we're definitely going to be seeing the Razak again sometime, but who knows how long they're going to be taking to show up. Hopefully it's a while, because they creep me the hell out, but, you know, I would like to know a bit more about their history and lore, so, For now, let's go ahead and move on to some more pleasant, if arcane, phenomena throughout the land of Alagasia. In my search for loose plot threads throughout the books, I came across a number of interesting mysteries that may or may not pay off into larger stories as the series continues. So be forewarned, most of these we don't really know much about, and I'm not sure how relevant many of them will be going forward, but they're all interesting. One thing I'm pretty sure is going to turn up are the 7 words that Brahm spoke in the ancient language. So, as he's dying, he passed these down to Eragon, but we have heard no mention of them ever since. Considering that these were brought up during the course of Book 1 and then were never explained, I've been wondering what's up with these since I was literally a small child, and Paolini stated that he does plan to explore this in the future, so hopefully it happens sooner rather than later. Adjacent to Brahm, we have his friend and ally, Jode Longshanks. He keeps turning up throughout the books and ends up playing a pretty pivotal role in breaking the siege of Drasleona. And that's not even to mention the initial theft of Saphira's egg from Galbatorix. Interestingly enough, released alongside the Inheritance Anniversary Edition was included a letter from Jode to a secret society that he's apparently a part of. So they're named the Arcana, and they are dedicated to the preservation of knowledge, and are responsible from the Domir Aberrida, the history of the Writers' War that was subsequently banned by Galbatorix. I'm pretty eager to know more about these folks, and I think they'll probably be playing some sort of a role in the coming age, however small that part may be. The Arcana is definitely keeping a close eye on Alagasia, and a large emphasis is placed on a few individuals in particular. Angela's one of them, but they're also looking out for her old mentor, a generally pretty odd individual named Tenga. Whatever Angela is, Tenga definitely appears to be of the same race, power class, or practices the same school of magic. What any of that is, we have no idea. Here's what we do know. Tenga is definitely looking for the answer to the question. Your guess is as good as mine, what that question or answer may be. And again, that's a topic that deserves a whole separate video. He's also actually responsible for inventing several interesting spells throughout his life, including the one that Eragon uses to hide the Eldinari after he finds them in the Vault of Souls. If you ask Jode, he seems to think that Angela and Tenga are both a race called Inare, so I think it's probably time we talked about Inare. Inare are probably the most mysterious race in all of Alagasia, if they can even be referred to a race at all. Really, we have no idea what they are other than greatly powerful magical beings. There is some evidence that Angela and Tenga are Inare, as we saw Jode suggest, but the most interesting evidence of Angela as an Inare comes from another book series entirely. So Angela straight up makes an appearance in To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, and yes, Paolini explicitly confirms that the woman named Inare in that book is the same person as Angela, the herbalist that appears in the Eragon books. Very interesting stuff, and it seems that these two distinct universes are far more connected than anyone had first imagined. Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about some of the connections between these two series in the near future. Oh. But for now, let's go ahead and quickly review our knowledge of the Grey Folk. So these were a sort of mysterious race of humanoid beings that lived on Alagasia long ago. Dragons and dwarves were apparently already around when the Grey Folk showed up from wherever they came from, but humans and elves hadn't quite made an appearance. We also know that they tended to actually be gray colored, and believe it or not, we appear to know what caused their disappearance. Long ago, the only magic that existed in Alagasia was wordless and formless, which caused a number of issues. Indeed, the Grey Folk seem to have caused a number of catastrophes, nearly destroying their entire society in the process. As a result, they got together and decided to do something about all that wordless magic nonsense. They bound the ancient language to sounds, making it easier to control and influence in the process, and as a result, creating the ancient language. But this seems to have taken an immense toll on their entire species somehow, and they slowly faded away from the land of Alagasia, the race seemingly dying off in the process. I'd wager we're going to be seeing some interesting tidbits about the Grey Folk sometime in the near future, or at least a more robust accounting of their history and the binding of their magic. Because as we talked about earlier, there does seem to be a witch in the far north of Alagasia that is practicing wordless magic, and Murtagh is on his way to investigate. Like, right now. Let's take a brief bit of time to talk about that dwarf god thing. If you'll recall, a manifestation of the dwarf god Guntera appears at the congregation gathered at Farthendur for Oryx's coronation ceremony. It's weird, but it's the good, mysterious kind of weird. I don't think there's ever going to be a 100% definitive answer on what this was, and again, this is one of those topics that deserves its own video to examine in detail, but for now, that dwarf god thing is left mysterious and otherworldly, and we just have to kind of guess what's going on there. So let's bring our attention to the last, most arcane topic of all the arcane topics we've mentioned so far. That's of course going to be spirits. Spirits appear to be tied to a magic system in Alagasia based on binding them to do things. Yeah, they're not really well explained to our characters, and Paolini has been quite cagey when asked about them. I think that Angela probably knows more about them than she's letting on, and Triana, which is one of the Varden's spellcasters, kind of dabbles with the binding of spirits. During the course of Brisingr, we also got to witness them up close, interacting with Eragon and Arya in ways that absolutely should not be possible by just laws of physics wise. It's clear that they're immensely powerful beings, but there's a huge gulf in understanding between them and humans. This is the magical element of the series that intrigues me the most, and I'd love to see it developed further. And I think we probably will see it developed in the future, if only a little bit. Honestly, I'd love to keep a few soft, kind of unknowable magic systems in this universe. One final question. What questions did I forget about? I'm sure there are plenty of them. Go ahead and drop them down in the comments down below. And I mean, what do you think is going to happen in Book 5? Murtagh, right? There's going to be some crazy stuff that goes down, and I want to know what you think. I'll see you very soon for Book 5. Oh, God, I'm so stoked. Thank you folks for tuning in today. It's been a ton of fun putting this video together. If you enjoy what I do on this channel, I would urge you to consider supporting me over on Patreon. Not only does it directly support the channel, you also get early access to content, channel updates, previews, and much more. I will see you folks very soon to talk about Murtagh, and in the meantime, I hope you have a great day.